Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about some math. We're going to talk about some basketball. We're going to talk about some math in some basketball. And I'm going to personally have a blast, and I hope you do too. With that in mind, we're going to talk about basketball, the basics of how it's played, and how there's math just inherent to that, as well as the players, the spectators, money, and just so many other things along those lines, and some other things that come to mind, like video games and movies, and just again a lot of other things. So, like I said, I look forward to this. Let's dive in. So, to start with basketball, it's a game where you shoot a basket into a hoop. And that is something that's inherently mathematical because the point is to score, right? To win. And again, that's inherently mathematical. Um, there's math in trying to score, but also everything along the way. And with that scoring, the idea is like you could shoot your basic throw, which is worth 2 points, and shoot far enough back. And you could get a three pointer, worth as you could guess it, 3 points. And how those things are defined is mathematical as well as the court that you're playing on, right? There's math in the dimensions of those courts. There's math in regulating those dimensions, like let's say for professional play. There's math in the ball itself, both in the geometry behind the ball, but also the air that goes into it and the physics involved in that to have the ideal situation and condition to play. There's math in the players themselves, right? There's math in them running around. There's math in them keeping track of not only their position, but the position of their teammates, the position of their opponents. And there's math just in all of the physics involved, the physics of the running, the physics of the ball and shooting it. And they may not always be writing it down, but these players, they're doing the math. And these coaches, they're making plays. These players are carrying out those plays and they're adjusting to the situation. And they are, deciding when to shoot, when to pass, when to block. Um, Whatever you say about it, there's math involved at every step. Because there's math in the shooting, math in the passing, math in the blocking, math in the fouls, math in the boundaries of the court. And when you're shooting, it's just like it is such a good example of parabolic motion, which that could be useful in class, but I mean we you almost never see it used um, in a way I think that reaches people. Like there's been times in the past where I've told stuff about parabolic motion where and I had to be very careful with it, but I would shoot a ball just to kind of get that across when I was able to. But my whole point is there's a lot of math involved, a lot of physics, and back to the players. Not only is there math and what they're doing to the court, on the courts, but there's math outside of that, right? There's math in the training, the type of exercises they're doing, right? There's math in the strength training, there's math in the cardio training, there's math in their diets, what they eat, the nutritional value, the fat content, you name it, right? There's math in when they're eating, math in their sleep and how that affects gameplay. There's math in the deals that they take. There's math in you, the spectator, keeping up with their stats, whether you're dealing with fantasy football or you're gambling. Either way, you're keeping track. And you're also keeping track of the players and what they're doing on the screen. You're following along, and whether you realize it or not while you're doing it, you're doing math. And here's the thing here is the thing. Not only is there math in the stats, but like the NBA recognizes that. Because there's actually NBA math where their tagline is because every stat tells a story or something to that effect. And this is the kind of thing that I've been saying for years. Statistics are very useful for like just so many reasons, and when it comes to those stats, right, when it comes to data in general, they tell a story. And what kind of story they tell, well, it depends on who's telling said story, but a story is being told nonetheless. I kind of think about it this way, right? You have the data, uh, and it's kind of giving you an idea of what's going on, right? It's either giving you a really good picture of things or it's kind of giving you a trailer, right? in how people use those like bits of data, how they use stats, that depends on them, and context is key. But I like the idea that you have something like the NBA having NBA math and being able to tell people like, yes, stats tell a story. And I think that's cool because you see that play out over the course of the NBA overall, right? Because you see people keeping track of like stats, and not only are like spectators keeping track of that sort of thing, but coaches are, other players are, and even before they get to the NBA, if you look at the NC like double A, they're gonna have stats that come with that, and before that, stats that come with high school. And I'd argue even before they get on like a high school team, for instance, someone had to be paying attention to what they were doing before, and they have to try out, they have to be observed. But my whole point is, there's a lot of data involved. There's a lot of stat involved, and it's cool that you see that being recognized on such a large level. I'm not sure how many people know about NBA math, but it's out there, and it's cool that they do that. And I'd be willing to bet people will definitely come across it. And then here's the thing, right? Not only is there math in everything that I said, and in drafting and again, like keeping track of the stats along the way, but there are some players who, they knew how to invest their money. They knew how to get good endorsements. They knew how to build different teams and do different projects. And I think about like Michael Jordan, and I think about LeBron James, and that's not an accident that I brought them both up. They often get compared. But like they have made so much money over the years, and there's not an accident with that. And there's math with that. There's math in the kind of deals that they were taking, the kind of projects they pursued, and all the kind of behind the scenes stuff that they've done. All the while, LeBron is still playing, and Michael Jordan was playing for quite some time. And speaking of Michael Jordan, like I grew up, well, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s and 2000s. And back in the 90s in particular, it was like you could not escape the Bulls. Like, they had a run like in the 80s that bled into the 90s where it's just like you couldn't get around them back then. Like you didn't have to be a huge basketball fan to like be aware of the Bulls and know Michael Jordan if nothing else. And I remember I think it was like NBA Live. I think that was one of my first games that I had on the PlayStation. And I tried different teams, but I definitely was playing the Bulls because they had that option. But speaking of that, right? There's math in the games, right? Basketball is something that's inherently mathematical, and gaming is something that's inherently something that's inherently mathematical. So it makes sense that their fusion would, of course, be mathematical, because not only do you have like the game of basketball in these sort of games, and then any like tweaks on those rules, but you have the players and their stats, and this is like if they're using the NBA, right? Because not all basketball games have to do with that, but like a lot do, right? But you have different like NBA games, different uh, NCAA games, different games where it's like maybe it's not either one of those, but like they deal heavily with basketball. And no matter how you cut it, not only is there math in the game of basketball itself, but there's math in how that game is being coded, how it functions, how it flows, how the characters are built up, math in the animations, you name it, and there's math there. And I think that's cool. I think it's awesome. And then not only that, right? You have math is the player yourself because you're picking, these different players, these different teams, and these different games, and you're understanding the physics of those worlds. Um, but you're making decisions yourself that impact, your victory, and you're also deciding if a game is going to be a worthy purchase for you, right? Because you're investing time and money, and you're trying to see what makes sense for that. Um, and here's the thing, right? Like, not only is there, math in the NBA, and that larger game of basketball, but of course that trickles down to every other form of basketball, right? And when if you're playing in the street, there's so many different variations on basketball that you can play, so many different rules that you could have. But no matter how you cut it, there's math in that. And with the NCAA in particular, like they don't just deal with basketball, right? They deal with football, like soccer, a lot of other things. And there's math in that. And one of the things, like one of the most interesting things that's been coming up in recent years is the idea of players being able to use their name image and likeness in order for a profit. Because with the NCAA, it's a nonprofit organization and it's tax exempt, and there's so much that comes with that, and math involved in just every single step. But for a long time, players weren't able to, use their own likeness and image and stuff to make money while they were on a team, and that that gets kind of crazy because it's like there's so much involved where it's not the best setup, right? And so that's changed in recent years, and I think that's been pretty cool because you get to see some people branch out. And I think like the first few people that come to mind with that are like Angel Reese and Flau'jae Johnson, um, because they're killing it right now. They're playing the game, they're playing it well. They're out there making ads, being on different programs, and really getting out there. And there's math on every level with that. And speaking of like Flau'jae though, she's also a rapper, which like if you've been keeping track, you probably already know. But there's math in that too, and I think that's awesome. But no matter how you cut it back to basketball, there's going to be math in it. Whether you're the player or the spectator or the coach, whatever the case may be. And then there's not only math within the game, but math outside the game, and what you do if you're someone who's playing professionally, right? Because there's so many ways that you can spend your career if you're careful. And there's so many people who've been great at basketball over the years that have just had like second careers, third careers, you name it. And I think that's cool. So yeah, if you've stayed, thank you for doing so. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you think about basketball differently. And honestly, I want you to discuss things. Discuss them with me. Discuss them with each other. And if you are like discussing with each other and you're talking about your team and your preferences, please be nice. Anyway, I'll see you in the future. Professor Prime out. All right, so I thought this video was over, but it's not. I wanted to mention a few things, like back to the gaming part. Like a while back, a studio made like an unofficial game where it was like supposed to be like a joke where it was saying that it was a sequel to like Barkley Shut Up and Jam and Space Jam. It was like a Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden, and it's an RPG. But basically, I wanted to let you know that there not only is like math in the game of basketball in that game, but math and how it's structured as an RPG and everything that that implies. And I think that's cool. And I basically wanted to let you know that it exists. And speaking of that game, since Space Jam was, an inspiration to that, let's talk about Space Jam. With Space Jam, yes, there was an eventual sequel to that, but I'm just focusing on that first one. It came out pretty much at the height of Michael Jordan's career, and kind of came forth because of some ads, right? There were some ads back in the day with Michael Jordan, Bugs Bunny, and all that stuff, Looney Tunes overall, and eventually that became Space Jam, where it's like Michael Jordan teaming up with different Looney Tune characters to save the world from aliens over a game of basketball, which I enjoy, unironically. Like, it was awesome. And there's math not only in basketball how it's played in there, but math and the animation involved, math and getting that to work with the live action segments, math and any music that was used, math and the lighting, math and the actors and their takes on things, how the voice overworked was done, like math in the breathing and the volume, just math at every level, and of course math in the budget that's associated with with the movie, as well as its profit, right? And like I said, it did have a sequel with LeBron James, which that's appropriate. But that one I didn't see. I just saw the first one, which I still, again, unironically enjoy. So that's pretty much it, though. I just wanted to mention those two things because I was pretty sure that didn't come up, and when I stopped the video. So yeah, this time I'm gone for real. I'll see you in the future.